Well, delighted to be joined for a football chat by Dick Clerkin. Dick, how are you getting on?
Brilliant. Brilliant weekend. Spoiled somewhat yesterday, I'll tell you now in a minute, Mike. But started off Friday with the Monaghan GAA Classic, which is a well-known, fantastic fundraiser up here. Has been going for 12 years, but it was great for me this year. I had 3 generations. So my dad, myself, and my young fella played.
Ah, brilliant.
In the team. Yeah, it didn't help with myself sticking the ball out of bounds in the first, and it's not a great start to the day. But great, okay, and great is it sort of falls every time this year. If I'd say there's a lot of listeners would know of it, and golfers would play it, it'd be very well supported. It always sort of fits in around the championship, so that tied in well with Monaghan playing. Spoiled, unfortunately, Mike took the young lads up to O'Neill's yesterday, and what jersey did the eldest fella pop up wanting to buy?
Oh no.
Awfully.
Oh, brilliant.
I had to get it. It was lovely. You know,
I've always said
the white one. It's the white one, not the the beautiful.
White one is lovely. Yeah,
I'll give that.
We always have lovely kit, in fairness, and at least our teams are starting to match the quality of the kit on the pitch now as well.
There you go. And I said, yeah, no, I can buy it. I'll vouch for that. Yeah, they're coming good between the Tailteann Cup and the hurling and the young lads. Yeah, go on. So that's it. So you came home with the hurling from Uri. We went up to Uri for the spin yesterday. So yeah, now we're joking. So great weekend. Golf, football, plenty of championship football. Hard work being a pundit tracking these games, mind. Jeez, between watching them in real time and I had to sit down last night to watch the Saturday game and the Sunday game back to sometimes you need to watch games twice. Jesus, a lot of stuff to get through, but a lot of good games. We'll talk about them now.
There is a lot to get through. I'll tell you quickly, it's not a great story. It's actually kind of a sad story the way it worked out. But we were playing, I think it was the GAA Golf Classic, and all 4 scores counted on each hole. We 20
the whole day.
Yeah. No, like all 4 scores on each hole counted.
Yeah.
So we 20 points after 3 holes. We were flying. 4th hole, Burr Golf Club, 4 balls into the water. Dead done, dead duck, game over, ball burst.
Head for the bar.
And like each one,
I felt like that on Friday.
Like each one of us, like the first lad hit it into the water, and we're like, "Oh, next lad can't do that." Then next lad takes driver, 3rd lad takes driver, 4th lad takes driver, and the day from being an unbelievable day, the day is done. But that's some bad golfing stories. Dick, lots of good football to talk about at the weekend, and we'll start in Croke Park. Where do you fall on this? Like, a lot of people saying, oh, Dublin are gone back to their Jekyll and Hyde of, Pillar Caffrey times, mixing the good with the bad, etc. They're not clinical anymore. I don't think they're as bad. Like, they missed a hell of a lot of chances. I don't think they're as bad as people are letting on, and a lot of that could be rectified maybe if Con is on the pitch and their efficiency kind of creeps up. And then Armagh kind of been blown up a small bit as a result of that game as well. Where do you fall on those 2 teams after the weekend?
Strange one. I was at that game was on at the same time as the Monaghan Clare match, so I was sort of half watching it on the RTÉ player and watching the match. So I got bits of it and got the highlights. It was a strange one. Like, Dublin aren't that bad, and they're not as good as they might have been in Salt Hill. There's some in it. And again, I've said it multiple times this year. If Dublin just don't have the raw ability in their team and their panel to play in 3rd gear and beat teams. They just don't. They have to be the team that we've seen in Salt Hill. They have to be the team that works as hard as everyone else has to work to compete. And if they're off it a bit, they become very average. And we've seen that multiple times this year, and it reared its head again in Croke Park against what is a very accomplished Armagh team. We'll come to them in a wee bit. And when that sort of raw, natural, instinctive ability isn't there, you'll see what you've seen on the weekend. Poor shots, poor shot execution, and that's not something you can fix. So I heard Philly McMahon and I heard boys talking about, we can improve that. You can't actually improve how good you are at kicking. You're only as good as the training you've done from a young fella and your ability and your skill set and your ability to kick from range. You can improve your concentration to a point. You can improve the intensity. But some players just their scoring rate is poor and will always be. Some days they'll have a good day and they'll hit more than they normally. But over the course of the season, you're as good as you typically are in terms of in front of goals. And just Dublin just don't have enough players that are of the ability. You take Con out of the players that went before them, and when they play against a good team like Armagh, and then this is the big thing, their work rate and intensity is down, then that comes to bear. And that's just what we've seen against Dublin. That's not the first time we've seen it this year. and it'll probably not be the last. And the problem is with them that they'll turn up, or if they turn up on a knockout day, be it in a preliminary quarter-final, they'll get put out. And that's the concern for Dessie Farrell. Not that they haven't a high ceiling that they can reach. They know it's there. The problem is it's the variability that's there in their team at the minute, and that's the concern. He just doesn't know what he's going to get week on week, and that's a real concern for Dessie Farrell.
It's kind of looking like Dublin are now maybe a team that they can take out a Galway or they could take out a Donegal, but can they take out potentially 4 teams? Like, no, they're actually now 5 games they're going to have to win the All-Ireland probably. So like they might win 1 or 2 or take out a big team, but can they do it day on day on day on day? And if you're saying there, if the levels drop at all, is Dublin's average game going to beat a big team? Probably not.
It's not like it was in the past. If you remember back in their heady days when they were winning All Irelands for fun, they could have a bad or an average day, and they could roll 5 or 6 subs off the bench to get them over the line or to blow teams out. They just don't have that anymore. So their starting players have to be performing well. They have to be at the pitch of the game from the start, and even their starting team is back into the pack that they're beatable by half a dozen teams, and we've seen that. So that's where they're at. So there's no point in sort of trying to blow them up to be something that they're not. But equally, there's no point in knocking them down. Like there is a pathway there for them to win an All Ireland. It's just like every other team in the mix. It's going to be bloody tough. They're going to have to win not 4 but 5. So they have to get a result against Derry. That'll get them into a preliminary quarter final. So if you run the odds on that, Mike, you that's a betting man. So say if they're even money in every one of those games, so an even money multiplier through 5 games, they're a long shot. That's the reality for Dublin to win an All Ireland based on what they've done to themselves at the weekend, which has put themselves in a hard route to get to an All Ireland final, whatever but anything before.
Just on Armagh, we were talking about maybe Dublin's lack of depth. There's great depth in Armagh, and even just getting the X factor of Rian O'Neill back in the pitch. Now, my only worry would be, right, he almost played too well too soon. Does that make sense? Because he was just back. He played against Derry. He was peripheral to some extent. He played a team role, McGeaney said, but he got some great scores the other day. Sometimes he's only back involved. You kind of don't want to think like you're there yet, if that makes sense. You want to be chasing a performance and chasing improvement. So that would be my only worry from that respect. And I know that might sound a bit mad, if you get me. Do you get me?
When you're because now you're talking about Armagh in the same breath as you're talking about Kerry, that you want to be fully tested by the time you get to a quarter final to know where you're really at. And we'll talk about Kerry in a minute. That's the question mark over them. They haven't been tested, and when they meet a team that's going to go at full intensity and meet them face to face, where are they at? Yeah, and I would agree with you on that point. Like if you look at the few points, especially that the two pointers that Rian O'Neill, he had lovely kicks, but there wasn't a Dublin man within 10 yards of him. He was able to sort of kick those at his ease. That's not that's not what you should expect to get when you get to a quarter-final, semi-final stage where you're a bit of Donegal or a Galway or somebody that's really up to the pitch of the game, or even a Dublin. I guarantee you, Dublin played Armagh in the morning, it'd be a different Dublin you'd see, because the psychology would be reversed. So yeah, there's a wee bit of that, but at the same time, 3 or 4 weeks ago, the whole question mark was, would he be about at all? Would Armagh be able to realistically win and compete for an All Ireland again without the Rian O'Neill factor? The reality is, number one, he's back, and now he's able to perform. So absolutely, they're trending in a really good direction, Armagh. There's no point in that we can find reasons to pick holes in them, but the reality is that the positives are much greater than any negatives, which there are very few to find at the minute. In that they've a panel, they're good players coming back into form, and now as well they've almost got 4 weeks of preparation time. Like if you've Rian O'Neill now that might be a wee bit behind in fitness or training, even though it doesn't look it, they can go and sort of plan now for 4 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of hard training that other teams can't. So like the Armagh are just in a really, really good spot, Mike. There's no point in saying otherwise.
I don't want to go into Derry and Galway too much yet, because we will in a second, but obviously Armagh play Galway in 2 weeks' time in what is a repeat of last year's All-Ireland final. That month gap that Armagh have, What way do you see them approaching that last game against Galway? Because they won't have a really competitive game. If they, just say they put out a second team against Galway, or they, and they give a good run out or whatever, and they're beaten by 5 or 6 or whatever. It's a big gap between the Dublin game and that All-Ireland quarter-final. Are they better to put out a right good team against Galway and go to try and win the game and make it 3 from 3 and make sure that they're properly road tested? Because Galway have to win that game. So that will be a proper test, and there'll be loads of bite to that because of the All-Ireland final last year and their previous history. What way do you think McGeeney will go about it?
I think so. I think he'll have to go at it with full endeavour, and maybe not risk a player that is carrying a niggle, right? You're not going to be foolish like that. But certainly for the likes of Rian O'Neill, that needs reps under his belt. Oisin, if he's back, there's a great opportunity to give that sort of strengthening panel game time. You see, what's making Armagh so strong this year, and people would have talked at the start of the year, they were missing half a dozen players from their All-Ireland final starting winning team. But the reality is that the boys that have come in are as good, if not better, than the boys that replaced the starting All-Ireland. So they're not weakened at all, if arguably they would have been strengthened. So there's a great opportunity to run a 15 that could be 5 or 6 players different than what we've seen at the weekend, but they're not weakened one bit, and say, right guys, there's a jersey now. Those guys now, if you remember in that Armagh panel, they all want to start. They all want to get on the first 20. So you putting 15 guys out, they'll be going full bore to stake a claim for a quarter-final, a semi-final, an All-Ireland final place. So I don't think you can't be at this stage of the year, Mike, going out in third gear, because if they go out and boys play poorly, you can't make an excuse for them to say, no, you're already qualified. That's a bad performance on a championship match on your CV, and that's not going to count to you for the next game. So any player that gets an Armagh jersey against Galway, they're going to be going 100%. No question about it. And that still should be good enough to beat Galway if they don't perform, because we'll come to Galway in a minute. They need to bring more to the table than we're seeing. But Armagh in a good place, and I don't think he's going to risk dropping that momentum, because a good team playing well, winning is something you don't want to compromise either.
Yeah, I was chatting to him after the Derry game, and while everybody goes back to, it's a natural thing within the media and within punditry and within journalism, they've only 6 of last year's All-Ireland final team starting, or only 7, or only 8. But it's mad how it's happened. Like, you look at it, Ethan Rafferty didn't play the All-Ireland final last year. Jardy O'Byrne came on. Ross McQuillan didn't start. Darren McMullen didn't start. Isn't that some position to be in when there's 4 or 5 lads coming in and they're now 4 or 5 of your best players, and all of a sudden there's a natural competitiveness. There's no sense of them getting stale or the hunger being gone or anything like that, because there's lads, as you said to me, there's lads biting at their heels for jerseys. And the best way to create hunger within a group is have a lad that is either hounding you for your jersey or has already taken your jersey and you're trying to get it back.
That's it. And that's what made Dublin arguably as good for those years, because the boys knew, and Jim Gavin would have been fairly ruthless with guys that they weren't performing, they were getting the curly finger fairly quickly, knowing that there was a guy as good as them on the bench. And that's what the best teams have, if you go back over the years, be it hurling or Gaelic or soccer, having that panel, having that. And it's a challenge for a manager to manage that, to manage the egos, to manage guys that, that a player that might have felt that he's a starter or might have had been for the previous 5 or 6 years, that turns up one weekend, sorry, you're not on the first 15 for different reasons, and that he's still in the mindset that he's willing to come on for the last 20 and do a job, and he's not feeling sorry for himself. So that takes managing on McGeeney's part, but from what we can see, he's doing it very, very well.
Well, he must be a master salesman, because he's managing to keep Stephen Campbell happy the last couple of years, coming off the bench, and that shows that everybody is invested, because like everybody says, how is he not starting and whatever, and I'm sure he's not happy in that role, but he's
it's tough. At a personal level, it's tough. Like, I went through that towards the latter end of my career, Mike, that you found yourself in that impact sub role, and for Stephen Campbell, it might have cost him an All-Star last year. If he'd have been a starting player for Armagh, like you're going to have to work very, very hard to win an All-Star and to win individual accolades coming off the bench. And you're asking a lot of a player that is arguably as good, if not better, than the boys that are starting ahead of him.
I don't think he even got nominated last year, did he?
No, but there was a conversation at the end that he was unlucky. Such was his impact. I think Kevin McMenamin was something similar. Did he actually win? Or
he never won an All-Star. He was. I think he might have been favoured for Footballer of the Year going into an All-Ireland semi-final and didn't get an All-Star after.
That's right. It is tough, but that's the whole team ethos and buying into that. And there are some players that are better bringing in. If you know it's a 20-man game, there's certain players are better finishing than others, and that's what the manager has to sort of do. So it is not just as simple as we might think, and I've experienced that. I remember Marek O'Rourke was quite good at that in terms of how he's managed the older players towards the end of their career. He said, no, there's still a job for you here, and we want you to stay around, but you're not going to be in a starting position. And we'll come to one of the examples of those for Monaghan in a wee minute, and that adds to a panel because you don't lose players towards the end of their career that you might otherwise.
I was up in Celtic Park on Sunday. Just a brief aside. Yeah. I'd never been to Celtic Park before.
Had you not? Well, how did you enjoy it?
I tell you what, no, I thought was mad when I didn't realise the Brandywell was right beside it.
Oh, did you not?
No, I didn't know. I wouldn't have known that. I parked up the hill. My God, that is the steepest hill of all time. It's past the pitch on the left-hand side, and I was only thinking, if a lad had a few pints coming down that hill, or if you were in bother trying to get up that hill, my God, and there was a car parked in the middle of the path, and it looked like it was suspended in midair. It was leaning off. It was crazy, but and it was a dirty old day. But what a game of football! My God, it was one of the best games I've seen in a long time. And this, listen, just plays into it. Like, I don't think you would have got a game like this under old rules. You definitely wouldn't have had. It finished Derry 220, Galway 414. Derry will definitely feel like they left 2 points behind. It's funny, the only points that they've got this year, they got a point against Galway in the league, and they obviously got a point against Galway in the championship here. They managed to get a draw here, because it would have been a travesty if they hadn't got something out of the game. But how do you digest this? Like, Derry were up by 8 at 2 different junctures in the second half, and Galway, in fairness, kept coming back. But it's funny, for a paddy-taddy team, Derry do concede goals, and it's like they conceded 4 the other day. They conceded a lot in the league as well. Oh, I do think they're getting very, very close to their best. They're inching closer every game.
They did, but I did call it. I did say Derry would take points to somebody. Wasn't exactly sure who or when, but I did see enough in that Armagh game, and just knowing the Derry players that they're better than what we've seen. There was issues around the lingering Rory Gallagher effect and stuff that they needed to sort out in-house. And it looks like they've done that. It looks like they've maybe sat down as a panel and said, listen, lads, he's gone. Let's stop crying and moaning about what's past. We've a panel of players here. We have an opportunity.
Like a girlfriend that's gone. You just need to get over it, Dick. You need to move on.
Get through the grieving process, and it looks like they've done that, and they've sort of backed Paddy Tally, and now they're starting to play for him, which it could be said that they didn't play for Mickey Hart, no point in saying otherwise, or not for long enough, and they sort of were still probably lingering that Gallagher might have been coming back. So it looks as there's a bit of a sort of a clearing of the air there to a point, and you can see that in the way that they just worked hard. I'll tell you a story now, Mike, and there's a Derry element to it, and I just thought of that when I watched it. Back in 2006, Jesus, that's 20 years ago, Christ, I'm getting old. Banty had Eamon Coleman, God rest him. Remember Eamon Coleman, the Derry manager? Banty would have been keen on taking sort of former managers in for a bit of pep talks and stuff. And he had Eamon in for a few sessions before we played Armagh in the 06 championship. And I've listened to dozens of different managers and people coming in, and a lot of the stuff is sort of generic and it washes over your head. But what Eamon Coleman said that day resonated. He says, and not use his rough Derry bro, but he says, on your worst day, some days you go out, the ball doesn't run for you, the breaks don't come your way, you don't get the ball, but still, on your worst day, you can still run and tackle. And I never forgot that. And I sort of would like to think, looking back in my career, if anyone said anything about me, it was like I still ran and tackled, even though some days the ball didn't bounce for you or the scores didn't go over. And it's as true a thing as ever. And I looked at that Derry team and I said, maybe somebody was passing on those words to the name of coming to those Derry players, because they'd done nothing else. They just tackled and ran and turned over and got hands in, and that sort of thankless work that teams sometimes cod themselves thinking that they're working, but they're actually not. And if you look at that Derry team, and to be fair, Galway as well, they just poured. It was just brilliant to watch that first half. I could watch it time and time again. Some of the turnovers, a few passages. Do you remember, Mike? There were actually nearly 2 or 3 turnovers.
It was crazy. I was looking at it. I was thinking, after getting the ball back, great work, and then they give it back away, or it's taken back off them.
Brilliant. It was brilliant, and obviously the efforts of the likes of Glass and Brendan Rodgers sort of set the tone around, and you do need that. You do need the tip of your sword. Some players that are a wee bit of bigger stature than others that set the tone for everybody else. But everybody mucked in, like Shane McGuigan, somebody who we sort of were wondering where was he at. Remember back in the Donegal game earlier in the year, he didn't turn up and he looked like a player bereft of confidence. He's back, but again, what was that founded on? Hard work, Mike, and that was great to see from a Derry team. That's what any supporter manager will probably tell you. Yeah, he'd be disappointed he didn't get the 2 points, but you know what? In the broad scheme of things, it doesn't really matter whole pile, because what they needed was a performance, that they're still in the race. They've still a bit of hope now. I think the hope was sort of getting drained from Derry, and a lot of the Derry supporters, I thought they were in touch and distance of competing in All-Ireland, that door has closed. I'm not saying it's kicked wide open now, but they're definitely back in the conversation, and that we'll see now. I'd say by the end of today, we'll know what the fixtures are, but that could be Clonus or somewhere close, and that could be a great occasion to have a crack at the Dubs, who are there to be beaten, and that'll be a great one now for Paddy Tally, and those boys will be sort of licking their lips to get at Dublin now in a couple of weeks' time, knowing that they've that performance in the locker, and they're still a team to be reckoned with, and that's a great place to be.
That elusive first win of the year, what better time to produce it than against the Dubs in what's basically a knockout game? And if they did, imagine the kick they'd get from that, and the feeling they'd get from a win, and then to be rocking into a preliminary quarter-final, and to be really dangerous.
The players coming back into form, like you have Doherty, who seemed like a player that sort of, he was all action, all energy. He had sort of waned a wee bit. He gave a great performance.
Dick, just on him, Ethan Doherty went off after about 43 minutes, and he was heavily strapped on his knee. I actually don't know how he came back on the pitch. Yeah. He came back on the pitch, and I'd say it was literally a case of, I don't know if Paddy Teddy said it to him, or he was like, listen, this is our season here. I want to come back in and do whatever I could do, and he did, in fairness to him. Lachlan Murray was brilliant off the bench as well.
Good player. Niall Lachlan, Toner, McFall, all these boys are good ballers. You know, it's like anything. It's like any team we've talked about in terms of the heads. If the head's right and the body's fit, that's what they can produce. The problem is for Derry for the last sort of 18 months, the head wasn't right. And for some other players, the body wasn't right. Even Brendan Rodgers, I know Brendan was carrying an injury there going into that Donegal game. He looks like a player that's back fully fit. And, McAvoy as well was a good player, even though we'll be disappointed with how he let Shane Walsh in behind him. So,
it was about all he let in behind him.
In fairness, absolutely, yeah. And again, a wee bit of, we'll come maybe touch on the frustration that is becoming Shane Walsh in a minute from a Galway point of view. But yeah, Derry, they'll be happy. They'll be disappointed, but they'll get over that fairly quickly. And the positives far outweigh because at the end of the day, they were 2 freakish goals. It'd be different if they were sort of getting walls through. They were 2 sort of...
The line ball was fairly borderline, Dick, and because Glass went so gung-ho for that ball and kind of appealed the call, he was gone out of the game, and there's no one back protecting. In fairness, Galway took advantage of the situation.
He did. And then Shane Walsh was a bit of an individual brilliance. So you could make a case that some of those goals now were sort of exceptional in their own right, as opposed to your whole defence is porous and there was sort of several goal chances and it was just like some other games. So Derry's in a good place. Galway, I have to give credit to Mike. Like, they were 8 points down in Derry. There's not too many. I certainly never done it playing for Monaghan. There's not too many teams go 8 points down the second half in Celtic Park and turn it around. So whilst Pádraig Joyce will be scratching his head a wee bit, like where's his team at now, based on the performances to date, there's a lot of character in that team that has to be given a bit of credit as well to pull a result out of the fire there.
Just to piggyback on your point there, they're 8 points down, they're away, a long journey. McDade is on the line, Conroy is on the line, McHugh is on the line, Shane Walsh is on the line, and they still find a way. Like that, like their whole season was on the line in the last 15 minutes, and they found a way to somehow lead with a minute to play. Now, they'd be disappointed. That's similar to the Dublin game, that they were in a drawing position against Dublin. They were in a winning position the other day, and they didn't win the game. But like that was rising from the ashes stuff in the last 15 minutes when the need could not have been greater.
Now, the same argument that we made for Armagh in terms of the quality of their panel, they list off the Galway subs that came on for the boys that came off: Kieran Malloy, Cian Darcy, Peter Cook, John Daly, Damien Comer. No dummies either, Mike, and they're good, 5 bloody good players to be pulling off the bench, and on another day it could be starting. So they certainly didn't weaken the Galway team. It was just that those players that we'd mentioned that got taken off just didn't have their day, and that's going to happen. They've been imperious in other games for Galway. It just wasn't their day, but that's a good sign for Galway that as well in terms of the strength of the panel, that those players came on. Just looking at the scores here, Cian Darcy a point, Peter Cook got a 2-pointer, and Damien Comer got a point himself and won a free. So they all had a big impact down the home stretch, which is a real positive now for Pádraig Joyce, because he knows now if some of his big players aren't firing, he can switch them out, and it's not only is it not going to take the team back, it's actually going to strengthen them down the home straight, which is what you want going into Croke Park.
Yeah, he was ruthless, in fairness. When their season was on the line, he was ruthless. That's the group of death. It's going to come down to 2 really interesting games. It'll be interesting to see Armagh's approach to Galway, and Dublin and Derry is do or die, basically. Dubs a little bit hit and miss. Derry, I think their graph is kind of trending upwards. In the other group of death, Mayo.
Group of death. You have to come up with something better than the group of death. As if you're going to be lined up against the wall if you lose. Jesus God.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll put it out to our listeners. There has to always be a group of death in any group stages. There has, and it's funny because even if it's not that bad, people will always say that's the group of death.
That's the group of death. Yeah, we'll stick with it for the minute.
In the other group of real note, Mayo, the endless story that is Mayo. What, like, their head was on the chopping block, a result and a performance was needed, and they delivered yet again. Jesus, if they could bottle this and they could make sure that there's no expectation on them in games, just pressure, like there was pressure to deliver the other day, they'd be a completely different outfit completely. They'd have 2 or 3 All-Irelands under their belt in the last couple of years.
I'd say there was one sitting watching that going, why didn't you just fucking do that 3 or 4 years ago in the All-Ireland final when you just let Tyrone walk over you? You know, that because they didn't bring that intensity that day, you know. But it just shows you there's a trend in the last 2 rounds. If you look through the big fixtures, the psychology of the teams going into the game had a big bearing on the result. Like the team that had to bounce back from or playing a team that might have been complacent, you know, you seen a sort of a turn up against the odds on the day, like, and that was very much the case in Omagh. Like Tyrone, now albeit only with a week to prepare, probably patting themselves on the back, feel good factor after the Donegal game. They were flat, and there's no point in saying otherwise. And Malachy recognised that very quickly after, and you could see it in it. They just weren't putting that bit of intensity. They probably just felt maybe we don't have to play in 5th gear here to beat Mayo, that they're on the way out, but that's
disappointing from a Tyrone point.
It is. I tell you, it's a naivety and a wee bit of immaturity. And there's a few sort of newer Tyrone players there. You could see that they were just, I'd say they'll get a good stern talking to from Malachy in terms of, no, that's not the level that we're going to perform at here. Might give a pass to some of the more established players that sort of know better, but young guys sort of, you could see, I'm not going to name any of their names because it would be a bit unfair, but that just not the application and the intensity or even concentration on the ball, just sloppy stuff that Malachy would be raging about, and they didn't reckon on Mayo turning up the way they did. And there was no question that the Mayo team that came up the road was a different animal. And that's great for Mayo. Like, it's a tough bloody couple of weeks there for them. And, like, and it's God as if they've gone through enough over the last 10, 15 years. And we said last week, we'd hope to bring a performance for not just Kevin McStay, but for themselves, because they didn't deserve to be where they were at after the Cavan game, because that's not a reflection on where they're at. So they met a Tyrone team that were complacent, and they got the performance that deserved. Great to see Paddy Durkin. Like, sometimes it just needs, and he didn't look fully fit But Paddy Durcan knows what to do. He gets in the shooting position and he can score. Like Paddy Durcan, when he was at his best, was sometimes Mayo's top bloody scorer from the day. Now, that's not a good saying for Mayo, and it never was, but it's still to have an asset like Paddy Durcan getting up 2-3 points a game, and he does that consistently. He backs himself. He takes the responsibility that the other Mayo forwards don't. That it says, I'm going to get up, get in the shooting position, and when the ball falls to me, I'm going to kick it over the bloody bar. And he done that. And those 3 points, not just the 3 points that he got, Mike, but that sense of leadership, and it gives a confidence to players around them that we've a player back in our squad that we can rely on, and it's another sort of string or a bow, and if they fed off that, and it was good to see, and no more than you should expect from Mayo, really, because that's the level that they need to play at in terms of that pace and intensity, because if they don't, they know where it gets them.
They're going to have to bring it again. They're going to have to bring it again the last round. That Cavan game could really come back to hurt them now, because Cavan are in pole position for that third spot at the very least. Donegal back on the horse in very emphatic fashion.
I'm trying to look at this. So they have to beat Donegal typically, don't they?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
They pretty much do, or else
or a draw. A draw. Even if they got on three, a draw would be brilliant. They'd obviously overtake Cavan, but that's going to be a big ask. And any questions around Donegal? I know you'd say a Cavan or Division 2 opposition, and maybe inferior opposition, but that was answered very, very emphatically by Donegal at the weekend. They had a weak turnaround from a disappointing, flat, energyless kind of performance, and they brought a huge game to Cavan the other day.
They have. Now, I expected that. Somebody was saying to me on I met him actually in the car park there this morning, they thought Cavan had put it up to goal. I never thought they would. And that's, I just didn't think Cavan were anywhere near as good as their Mayo game suggested. And Donegal, Jimmy McGuinness is probably one of the, even though they lost the Tyrone game, it wasn't because they didn't turn up, right? We sort of picked holes in the performance to try and reverse engineer a reason why they didn't. They were still good enough. And when Paddy McBrearty hit that, score to put them 2 points ahead. If you replayed that last 10 minutes, they'd win 8 or 9 times out of 10. They just didn't on that day because the ball fell from Tyrone. So Donegal weren't necessarily a million miles off the pace. And Jimmy McGuinness is one of Jimmy McGuinness's best traits. And I remember back to his initial, the consistency of performance. Like Donegal is one of the teams that you don't see this big dip that you've maybe seen in Tyrone, Dublin, Galway, Mayo over the last year. They maintain a very high level of performance, or they don't dip to the depths that a Cavan might have. Like Cavan could have been winning that. Like they think there was 5 points in it at one stage in the second half, and Cavan had a gale in that second half, and Donegal blew them away. You know, a lot of other teams might have struggled, and so that was a good performance, but not a performance that I sort of expected from Donegal. That'll be a cracker, like that Mayo Donegal game, because again, like a lot of teams outside of All Ireland finals, Mayo have a good record against Donegal and never sort of fear them, and especially when they don't have to go to Ballybuffet. So Mayo have no fear of Donegal. They've no fear of Donegal jerseys. They've beaten them more times than not, I would imagine, in championship football if you go back over the decades, and bit of confidence back in their sails, and the likes of Paddy Durcan and a few players that put their head up for a jersey. And I expect a good Donegal performance, so I expect that to be a cracker of a game if Mayo can get anywhere near close to the pitch that they brought to Omagh on Saturday night.
Well, Mayo's backs are to the walls again going into that game, and it's a position they love. So that'll be a fascinating game. Dick, you said you were in Clonus for Monaghan Clare. Funny old game. I was looking at I was following it on the Indo blog, which is brilliant every Saturday and Sunday. All the scores are updated, and you can see all the games going on. And there must have been I presume there was a gale, like a hurricane.
It wasn't as strong as you might think. Monaghan were just off it in the first half. There's no point in saying otherwise. They were very fortunate to be playing against the breeze in the first half, because if they had turned up and wasted the breeze with the way that they played, they could have been beaten. There's no point in saying they were very off the pace, a bit lethargic, and like a lot of teams, maybe a wee bit over complacent, maybe patting themselves too much on the back after the Louth game, and they thought it was just, and they got off to a good start. They went 4-1 ahead, and we thought, right, here we go, this will be sort of straightforward. And Clare just sort of threw a boot at sort of half a dozen 2-pointers, and 3 or 4 of them went over. There was an element of that too, Mike, and they sort of stretched out a bit of a lead. Now, in fairness, Monaghan were superb in the second half. I think this sort of hit 118 in the second half, and probably left another 2 at least, 2 go-sitters and another couple of points. So they could add another 10 points on what they managed to put up in the end. For Monaghan, because Monaghan now looking forward, like, can they realistically compete in with the big boys? That's what we're sort of seeing, and you're looking at players that you need to be performing well in weak spots. So Jack McCarron had a very good second half. Jack had been off it there for a while and was very poor in the first half. He'll be delighted. He really put on a show in the second half. And like a few other players like Enda Smith and Rion O'Neill, you know, certain players, this 2-pointer, that's your harvest. Get yourself into positions for kicking 2-pointers, and when the shot comes, hit it, because that. Don't be handing it to anyone else. And Jack done that. He had 3 beauties. Darren Hughes, I have to give mention to him. Like Darren Hughes, this time last year, was carried off against Cavan. Like Darren's 37, 38. I know Darren, he's nearly 20 years in the Monaghan panel, which is crazy when you think about it. 2006. Carried off, awful injury, knee injury, and I said, like, there's no way this man's coming back. Like, Darren is a young family. He's a big farmer here in Monaghan, a busy man. I said, there's no way Darren can get back from that. And everyone just expected. And here he was, put the hard work in over the winter and came off the bench, and he made a huge impact off the bench. The Monaghan were probably going to win the game anyway, but he was probably one of Monaghan's best players in the middle third.
Can I just say something about lads like that?
Remarkable. Yeah. That's remarkable. And people don't really get how remarkable that was, to not just to come back from an injury, but at that age and at that long service. And that's, I know we talk about it, people sometimes, we get sick hearing about it, Monaghan. That's why Monaghan are where we're at, because you have a Darren Hughes that come off the bench when he should, in every other county in the country, he'd be gone maybe a couple of years ago.
Can I just talk to you about lads like that? Like, I honestly just think lads like that are worth their weight in gold. And if I can't imagine what he went through to get back on the pitch and then to make it back and have a positive influence. The easy option, in fairness to you boys, you don't take the easy option. Like, even like I'm thinking Carl O'Connell could have walked away last year too, injuries and whatever. And lads just, sure, McManus is the same. Lads keep the shoulder to the wheel, even if they can only give, 10, 15 minutes, they continue to put their shoulder to the wheel. It's an amazing thing, really. You can't buy that within a club or a county, any team.
No, and it's something we did set. And like I suppose our generation, myself and Jap and Stephen Gollig, Leon Lennon, we sort of started that in terms of players. I remember going up to an awards thing in 2010. And I was 29, and Joanne Cantwell asked me, was I thinking of retiring? I was 29. I was like, what? But like it was the thing, in your early 30s, you were sort of done once you turned 30. Whereas in many ways, Monaghan, as much as anyone, has led the charge to sort of reframe. No, like, why would you, 34, 35, 36. We have a lot of boys now. It's quite uncommon now, or quite common now in Monaghan, that your boys now would play on until 34, 35, 36. Now, Darren's an exception now in terms of like Vinnie Corey, Desi Moan. I could name a team of boys that played into their mid-30s. And that's just a cultural thing now in Monaghan. There's no point in saying otherwise, that other teams should look at and sort of say, well, if Monaghan boys can play on and get enjoyment out of it, what are they doing? What are they doing up there that makes it that the likes of Darren Hughes and Carl O'Connell and boys before them want to play on? And a bit of pride in the jersey. They enjoy it. And there's a sense of duty, because there's an element too, as well, as we sort of know, if we step away too quick, you don't have the resources to backfill it, that you'll slip back, and you could easily slip back into a Division 2 or Division 3 team. Can
I just say to you on that, Dick, I bet you, I don't know Darren Hughes from Adam. I interviewed him once or twice, but I wouldn't know him. But I would imagine that it's in his head thinking, okay, Conor McManus is after retiring here, Vinny's after stepping away, I can't step away.
No, that's it. I can't, because they didn't do it. They didn't do it before. The boys before me didn't do it. And there's an element too that everyone's trying to break each other's records. I had the record when I quit. I was 170 championship games and 17 years. And I thought, that's a good mark. And I said, I think I'm now 5th place behind Manzi, Vinny, Darren, and someone else, which is great. We're actually meeting. There's a Contemporary Club are having a celebration night on Saturday night for Connor, for what he's done with Monaghan, and we're all meeting up. And Darren was actually texting me last week. He's putting the table together. He was asked to put a table together, so we're all going to meet up. And Darren's still bloody playing, and as well, Darren, a huge farmer here in town. His herd came down. Assistant aside, he won't mind me saying that his herd came down with TB at the start of the year, and lost his whole herd. And any farmers will know how stressful and traumatic that is. Yeah. And yet he was still able to put his shoulder to the wheel and train and get back. Now, he said himself it sort of gave him a bit of time to train because he wasn't as busy, but still you'd think your headspace would be somewhere else than playing for Monaghan at that age with that demand. It just great fella, great time for Darren, and I was delighted for him. I texted him after the game on Sunday. He says, "I'd say you were delighted with that, not just to get on, but to have a performance in." He says, "Yeah, there's 20 minutes in, mate. There's no more." And I said, "Listen, doesn't need to be any more. If you can give that 20 minutes, you're definitely an asset for the rest of the year."
Yeah. He's one of many elder statesmen, as someone has often have it up on Twitter. Our lads that are still going strong, and he's definitely still going strong. The other result in that group, Dick, down 25 points, Louth 24. I only saw the highlights of this, but this was a bit of a belter of a game now, in all fairness.
I did. I watched it last night because, again, I was trying to catch up at all the games, and some of them I hadn't seen. I was watching it again, tracking it on the phone, and you were like, Jesus, Louth, what's going on here? But again, strong breeze. Down are playing well. I mentioned this last week and have to be watched. They have a few good players. Murdoch, Pat Haverin, Danny McGill, who's son of, remember, Miho McGill played halfback for the Down team in the 90s. So from good stock. 3 good forwards that know where the posts are, and Conor Laverty has got things writing down. Down were a bit of a basket case there for about a decade or two, and not able to get their act together. A lot of unsavoury stuff going on behind the scenes. It looks like they've sorted that out, and they've got a panel of players willing to play together and play for the jersey. And Down, every Down team, are not short on confidence when they get a bit of a swagger. It was great to see Newry. There's a good crowd between the Louth support and the Down support coming up. So disappointed for Louth, but yet I think if they beat Clare, they'll still be in the qualifier series. So they'll be glad that they sort of put the flat Monaghan performance behind them and finish strong. But they were just beaten by a better, hungrier Down team on the day. Look at that block at the very end to win it.
Savage, wasn't it?
Quality, and then put it in the stand. The place going mad. You'd be just absolutely pumped. And there was a great Down support there, which, to be honest, there hasn't been much for Down supporters to get out and follow over the last number of years. But in fairness to Down, listen, they took their medicine over the last couple of years. They got into the Tailteann Cup. They went and won it. They've improved, and they're as good an example of a team that, parked their egos and sort of said, we're not too good to be down competing. They sort of realised that that's the level that they were at, went and got promoted, won the Tailteann Cup and secured themselves now All-Ireland football for this year, and they've gone up and competing now on their merits. And 2 weeks' time now, I'm so looking forward now to the Down Monaghan game. Not sure, I think it's probably going to be in Armagh, which you said yourself there recently, great bit of a cauldron. It'll be a full house, and that'll be an absolute cracker of a game with a huge prize on offer to a straight path to a quarter-final.
Yeah, Monaghan Down is basically winner takes all into a quarter-final. Loser goes into a preliminary quarter-final. And Louth, the hangover is probably over. They're getting back closer to their best, but they play Clare, and basically if they win, I'd say if they even get a result, if they get a draw, they'll be through on score difference, because their score difference is better. Just the last group we'll look at, Dick, Roscommon and Meath finished in a draw, which means Meath are through already. Kerry against Cork, second time they've met, obviously. Feisty enough at times, to be fair, but Kerry, the old undercooked question, are Kerry going to be undercooked again going into the All-Ireland stages? It's one thing being in a group that's maybe a little bit easier or whatever, because your path you're nearly guaranteed your path, but are you going to be battle hardened and ready for when a big hitter comes at you, potentially, and probably what's going to be a quarter-final realistically?
Yeah, again, we're looking for reasons to mark them down. You can only beat what's in front of you. Roscommon and Cork are, they're not in the top table, but on their day, they're no bad teams, and they put them away fairly comfortably. So what more can Kerry do at this stage? So most of Kerry's All-Irelands, if you go back over the decades, they came out of their province undercooked and were still able to get to Croke Park and produce a performance. So what I'm looking for from Kerry is not the results against these teams, I'm looking at key players that last year definitely underperformed or weren't available, and are they different this year? Are they going to get up to Croke Park for a quarter final, a different Kerry team than they were last year? And I think the question to that is definitely yes, and I know more so than David Clifford. Like, he just looks, there's an edge to him, and he's not necessarily shooting out the lights either, Mike, but he's still at his ease, kicking 1-3, 1-4, 1-5, whereas other forwards have to bloody work maybe hard for 2 or 3 games to that. So he's just coasting along very nicely, but he looks fit. He looks pumped. Do you know what I mean? Like, he takes a bit of abuse there from Cork at times, and he sort of just saw them off. And, they need him. There's no point, like, we can talk all day about all the other Kerry players. They need him hungry, getting to Croke Park. And I can just foresee a pity Pat wasn't on the pod today, because I can see a Kerry Armagh rematch coming down the tracks, like whether at a semi-final stage or a final stage. And like, that's the game Kerry should want to get. They should want to get that game, that because they know how sick they were leaving Croke Park last year. So have they players that they're trending in the right direction to be, when that game comes, that they're ready? And I think they are. Even Joe O'Connor, that is improving game on game. Bit concerned now about their midfield. Bit concerned about Diarmuid O'Connor. I don't know, are you hearing anything, Mike, in terms of how bad that injury is? Is it something that'll clear up with time, or is it something that he's going to sort of have to manage with?
Talk of a few knocks. Talk of a few guys that could be out for a couple of weeks now. Yeah,
they're doing it to have it. They can rest boys up effectively now for 4 weeks, which is good for them. But like, they're going well. Like the likes of Tom O'Sullivan, Foley, White, like All Ireland players, moving well. Paddy Clifford back, but Sean O'Shea again wasn't moving well last year. So they're trending very well. And I think they have to be very happy where they're at, but they know it's all about sharpening their saw for that big team that they're going to hit, either a quarter final and a semi-final stage. All they can do is keep doing what they're doing, playing well. Like that game was in the melting pot. Like, Cork brought something. They were 3 points ahead, albeit with a lead. You could see all the nonsense before half time and the cheering of the Cork supporters, which was great. You'd love it. But
I love that stuff. People
they left it all in the bloody dressing room. They were faking the game. They were bet after 10 minutes. Yeah. You know what I mean?
People say, "Oh, we don't want to see it. Oh, it's terrible." I don't know. I love seeing stuff like that. Now, they didn't back it up when they came back out between the white lines, which is the unfortunate thing, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
the important bit.
The other county that I will focus on for a second, Meath. In fairness, I'm sure they were absolutely destroyed after that Leinster final. They did the hard work, did the donkey work, beat the Dubs, and you're wondering, will this fizzle out a bit? And unlike other years, there looks to be a lot more backbone to this kind of Meath kind of crew. And they're already through, and they're playing Kerry in that last round. And if they get a result, they could end up top of the group. It's unlikely, but they've bounced back nicely. When you look at maybe how difficult Louth are finding it in another group, Meath have bounced back really, really well, in fairness to them. And then just to go through the Tailteann Cup really quickly, Wicklow, who were beaten first time out by Offaly, ended up topping the table. Limerick ended up topping the table. Kildare topped the table. A right good win over Sligo at the weekend, a real high-scoring game. And having been beaten in their first game, Fermanagh ended up topping the table as well. So there's some really tasty preliminary quarterfinals this weekend. Westmeath, I would not say expected to be in a preliminary quarterfinal. They were one of the favourites for the competition, and they're playing against Laois. All bets are off there. Midland rivals against each other. Offaly were beaten by Laois at the weekend. Mark Barry went for a goal from a penalty at the very end when a point would have done to draw the game, and that's kind of... Now, I'll be straight with you, Offaly after getting a favourable draw there, because there was some horrible draws that they could have got. Sligo are playing Carlow, and Wexford against Antrim, and Wexford were in pole position to top the group before the other day. And from Carlow's point of view, they were beaten by Longford at the weekend. Longford, who hadn't got a result yet. Carlow after putting themselves on the back foot there. So lots of... I think these group scenarios, they're thrown up... Anybody, like in a lot of these, the Tailteann, a lot of teams can beat each other on a given day, and same in the All-Ireland series as well, and it makes it really, really interesting right down to the last minute of the last group game.
Yeah, which there was always the argument in favour for it, that you have teams of the same level, and if you put teams of the same level, they'll take cuts of each other, and that's what you're sort of seeing. So, listen, what is a wee bit disappointing with the Tailteann Cup is that you can definitely see the players and the management, and on the TV it looks like supporters just aren't buying into it as much. There is certain games, maybe even outliers, but a lot of games, you see, geez, you'd feel that a few more players or supporters would turn up and support them, because definitely the teams seem to have bought in. Maybe that's just going to take a bit of time. Maybe it takes a wee bit of time for supporters to get their head around that, this is the competition that we're at this year, and just because it's not a Leinster Championship or an All-Ireland Championship or a qualifier that would have been, we're going to go out and support our team, because definitely you've seen this year more so. This is probably the first proper year that you can see that there's at least several teams properly going for this, and it's really added to the competition. So I think it'll obviously improve as you get into the quarterfinals and the knockout stages, that supporters will get behind their team, and it's great. And again, teams now, they can look at the likes of the Meaths that we've just mentioned, the likes of the Downs that have gone and won this, where it sets them up that they could realistically be a Division 2 All-Ireland competing county if they win through this pathway. So it's a testament to the competition, and the people who sort of cooked it up the last week. It's starting to really play out. But few more bums and seats would be nice.
Yeah, because it definitely looks like teams and managements have bought in. I don't think it doesn't look like there's anybody checked out yet, and that's making it to be a really interesting competition. Going down, the preliminary games obviously take centre stage this weekend again. Dick, thanks very much for your time. It was gas. I was saying to Milan earlier that I was in Monaghan and Harps over the weekend, and I was coming out the gate, and who did I meet driving in? Only your good self.
Why was I going? Pick the young lad up from hurling training, Mike. He'd be delighted.
Well, I was just...
It must have been your presence alone encouraged him to buy an Offaly jersey yesterday.
There was actually an Offaly jersey coming out of the training session as well. Yeah, I was delighted. My only disappointment was not to see you out in the middle of the pitch with a hurl in your hand.
No, mine's a bit thinner. It's a golf club.
Dick, thanks very much. We'll talk soon.
Mike. Have a good week. Bye now.
Thank you, Randy.